Okay, good morning everyone. Welcome to week 3 of our museum online museum management training. So today we have a very interesting topic on doing photography for your museum artifacts, and we have a special professional photographer on board from Color World. So before I begin, I would like to contextualize the context and content of this webinar on doing photography for museum artifacts. Let me just share my slides. All right, so this is, I would just like to contextualize why we are doing a careful photography of our museum artifacts. So first of all, in this book called Museum Registration Methods by John Simmons, and the other one, which is now on the 6th edition, no? Museum Registration Methods, edited by Rebecca Bach and Jean Gilmore, there's a discussion there on why we need to take good photographs for our museum artifacts. No, so this book you can actually download online. There's a section there on collections registry and photography of museum artifacts. No, so there is a need to document our collections. No, for various purposes. Now, there's also another resource online from the Government of Canada. This is the Conservation Institute in Canada. You can also download some materials there, such as this book called Lighting Methods for Photographing Museum Objects and Lighting Techniques for Photographing Heritage Objects. No? So in that article, there are different uses of digital images in different museum activities. So it is important that your photographs are clear. They are also able to capture the character, the biography of the objects from your museums, because they can be used in, number one is for collections management. You can also use this for conservation, like the need to photograph objects in terms of its conditions, no? Condition reporting, you need to document that. And then, of course, for research. And then, of course, you can also use these photographs for publication, which is also an essential educational collateral for your museum. So they can be in the form of small or large format photographs, no, that can be included in your database in your museums. So this is the publication called Lighting Methods for Photography Museum Objects. We have a copy here at Museo Kordilyera. Let's see how we can share this to our participants. Otherwise, there are also online resources that you can download from various museum repositories, even other sources online, no, on how to take photography for your museum objects. In addition, we just wanted to share we are ecstatic about this news from IFSU, from the Ifugao State University. So we visited the Museo Cordillera, the IFSU Techno Rice Museum at IFSU last February 21 to 23. And we saw their collections, and we also did some preliminary conservation and cleaning of their artifacts, as well as teaching their staff to do photography. Now, in photographing objects, you don't need expensive gadgets or expensive camera to do so. But you can also do makeshift studios, no, using this one, such as the ring light that you use for webinars. You can also use that for your photography. So we have the in-house cameraman of Museo Kordilyera who taught the staff of IFSU. That was last month. And then Mark also had this experiments on how to take photographs using this equipment that they have, no, available in their museum. So ito yung sample ng photos niya, so which is incredibly good, no? And also this one, a setup. So this the museum is located in a separate building, and there are some shelves there that you can actually use as a makeshift studio, no? Portable and easy to set up. No, this is just a cartolina board that was stuck on this reading stand, no, and you can do your photography there using this ring light. So we would like to also extend this subject on photographing your museum objects with the help of professionals. No, so this is the result of that ring light photography that was done in Ifugao. Okay, so we have also received photographs from ISU, care of Dr. Liza Tamargo. She sent this on yesterday, and we saw this a lot of progress going on at IFSU Museum. So they continue to do photography and cataloging of their museum artifacts. No, so this is their setup in the IFSU Museum. So we encourage you to do the same for your own museums. It is easy to do it without really spending so much on equipments. No, as long as the heart of of the the object is there, no, clear, and you capture the biography of these museum artifacts. So now, for this session, we would like to welcome Kuya Ompong Tan. We call him Kuya Ompong. He is also the photographer for some of our important artifacts at Museo Kordilyera, and some of this made way to our collections registry, our publications also at Museo Kordilyera. So let me introduce Kuya Ompong. So Kuya Ompong, in his early trials with black and white photography began after he traded his bicycle to buy his first camera at the age of 14. He first learned how to develop his own negatives and print photographs in the darkroom he had set up, no? On the third floor of his father's hardware store on Baguio, on Session Road. He first learned how to develop his own negatives and print photographs in a dark room he had set up on the third floor of his father's hardware store on Session Road. There, he experimented with lights control, time exposure, and strobes. This would later help develop his technique in the following years. His experience in black and white photography and darkroom work has given him the ability to use the camera as a creative instrument and as a tool of the trade, working with it like it was both science and art. He now puts to good use the innovations in digital photography with his trusty digital camera, his darkroom days as a distant memory. But the quality of his work today remains grounded on the discipline that film photography and darkroom work has instilled in him. It is a work ethic that cannot be substituted by Photoshop or by the speed and upgrades in digital photography. His formal education is in industrial engineering, and occasionally this lets him view photography from a methodological perspective. His compilation of portraits of Baguio artists dates back to 20 years as part of an exhibit documentation for the Marinol Sanctuary Gallery, SM Gallery, and the Benca Museum. He continues to photograph artists not as straightforward portraits, but as a collaboration between artist and photographer, one that uniquely reflects the artist's personality, history on the art production processes. For the last 10 years, he, together with other volunteer photographers, has been in partnership with the Autism Society of the Philippines with their annual photography workshop and exhibits entitled Colors of a Spectrum. An interest in historical rephotography began in 1999, and in the last 10 years, Kuya Ompong has been in over 10 exhibitions interpreting this concept. He is steadily compiling a visual documentation of Baguio's changing cultural and physical landscape. So his experience is really unbeatable because he has been in photography for the last 50 years and now shares this knowledge through teaching photography workshops, no, in various venues. So good morning, everyone. Let us now welcome Kuya Ompong for his presentation.
Hi, good morning. I'm Ompong. I'm a professional photographer, and I'm here today to help you set up a small studio that will be able to take quality photographs of museum artifacts. The first thing you have to prepare is a room that's fairly a good size. This one that I'm using now is about a 12 feet by 10 feet open space. It contains two tables. One table behind me is where we'll be taking the photographs. The other table on my right is where we put the artifacts before we take the photos, to be able to see the photographs ahead of time and to be safer in handling. We now go to setting up the studio. Here are the basic tools that we need to set up the studio. A camera that you're comfortable with, together with this tripod, a sturdy tripod. We have some tapes, clamps, and gum tacks to help you hold the objects. We have a color checker, which I will explain later. We have this scale ruler, which you usually take together with the artifacts to show its size and shape. You have two lamps, and we have an illustration board, which is my preferred background because it has a white side and a black side. I usually like setting up my camera first. The next thing I'd like to set up is the illustration board as my background. I do it in such a way that it forms a smooth, curved surface, which will give me a seamless background. It's held on by two pins. The lights come in next. These lights are in at least 45-degree angle to the camera. Now that we've set up the camera, let's take our first piece. Okay, now I position my lights 45 degrees angle. I will now turn on the one on the left. If you notice, there's a shadow that is cast on the right side back. If I open the other side, it should cast a similar shadow equally, which will look like a butterfly. This simply shows that my lights are giving an equal luminance on the left and on the right, which is ideal. Notice that there's a harsh shadow. You really see the shadows that's being cast. This is what you call a hard light. In museum photography, it is preferred to have a softer light to prevent an extreme contrast of light and shadows. And how is that achieved? We're now converting the hard light into a soft light, and this is how it's done. A piece of tracing paper and tack it onto any old frame, and all you have to do is put it over the light source. So if you notice the shadow, so I start inserting this tracing paper on the left side. Notice the shadow being cast on the right has disappeared. If I do the same on the other side, now the shadows are so much softer and you have more details, less contrast on the object. This is now how the setup looks like, and this is a very comfortable lighting situation already. So we can start shooting. Next is I will help you set up your camera, so you will be recording the images in the best possible way. Here are some camera settings that I would recommend. First, the ISO setting that I would recommend is 400 or below. The reason for this is it will give you a finer photograph than using anything above it. From 800 to 6400 would give you a noisy photograph which will come out as grains and is not pleasing to the eye. We now set white balance. White balance is measured in degrees Kelvin, which range from 1000 to 10,000. That's from the glow of a candlelight to a clear blue sky. The camera is designed to capture and deliver your photographs at 5,500 degrees Kelvin. How is this done? There are built-in filters to compensate and correct the different white balance situations. One can visibly see this change in color temperature when day turns into night, and that's from sunset to dusk. For this project, I was able to obtain a bulb that has a technical data of 6300 degrees Kelvin. This is the temperature that I will be setting on my camera. In a series of test shots, I will show you several photographs that shows how the camera captures the images on the different scales of white balance. In this graph, you see that 6300 has the best result. Auto also produces something really acceptable. It so happened that shade or cloudy is rated at 6500 degrees Kelvin, which is close to our setting, thereby producing a very, very good image. If by accident you set your white balance in the wrong position, you will be able to recover this from post-processing. Next thing you should consider is shooting with RAW and JPEG. RAW would give you the most optimal quality, the biggest file. Choosing a lens, I would recommend 50 millimeters or longer. The reason why is it would give you a better perspective, or I would say it would give you a correct perspective of how the object looks. Avoid using wide-angle lenses. It has a tendency to distort the object. Here are the examples of the following lenses and its effect on the object. Choosing the right aperture and focusing in the right place is the key for a crisp and clear photograph. I recommend that you start shooting at f8. To show you why, here are some photographs that has been focused in two different places and shot in several aperture openings. Notice that at f4 you have a very shallow depth of field. The only clear portion of the photograph is where you are focused at. The one on the left were focused right in front of the red bead. The one on the right is we're focused at where the ribbon starts. At f8, notice the difference in the depth of field. f16 gives you a photograph that is basically sharp throughout. It's a matter of taste on what aperture you will be using, because some photographers would like a blurry background, other photographers would like everything sharp. Choosing the metering mode, evaluative, is the safest way to go. It has been designed to give you the best output on a certain scene. Also, there are times that you have to use your exposure compensation. The camera is not a perfect equipment. If there's too much white that it sees, tendency is to make it darker. And if it sees too much black, the tendency of the camera is to make your photograph lighter. So exposure compensation allows the photographer to decide on which way to go closer to the real quality of the photograph. After having learned all of this camera settings, we now start shooting our photograph. This is the first photograph that we are taking. It's a bulol, a rice god, and to show the size, the scale guide is placed parallel to the camera and does not obstruct the object from the camera view. You use this for records purposes. You can also add a color checker if you intend to publish or print this. The color checker will help you find the real white balance when difficulty is encountered. Usually printers have the calibrating tools to make sure that the color rendition is in perfect order. So now that you've learned all of this, we start shooting and start enjoying the photography of the product. If you don't know what to take, it's best that you take all the angles possible. Also, there are times that you have to show the use or the functionality of a certain object. And sometimes you have to show the front and the back, or sometimes tools, how it's used. Some objects might not have a front side or a back side, but it's up to the photographer to try to find out what the story is behind this object. You can also play with the backgrounds and see which background suits the object better. Here are now some illustrations to help us set up photography for 2D objects. 2D objects may include documents, pictures, books, and artworks. Small items can be scanned, medium items can be photographed on top of a table, and bigger items have to be photographed on the wall. Similarly to the setup that we did, our lamps are still at 45-degree angle to the camera's center plane. Once we open again the light on the left, we notice the following readings that are on top. The left side of the artwork is nearer to the light source than the right side. So this gives us an uneven reading. Once we open the right side, also it mirrors the readings given on the left side. To make this even, we open both lamps at the same time. The result would be a very evenly illuminated artwork, and that's when we take the photograph. In 2D photography, the lamp positioning and the camera positioning are very critical to producing high-quality photographs. Succeeding illustrations would show you why we have to keep the lamps in a square position or parallel to the artwork. A slight inclination of each lamp would give you an uneven illumination, causing dark to light effects on the artwork, which will be rejected. When your camera has been properly prepared in a square or parallel position in reference to the artwork, the result will be a perfectly rectangular image. Either putting the camera lower or higher will give you a very bad distortion of the artwork. Some of you might have encountered a distortion that is convex, meaning the edge of your image is curved outwards. This is a result of having shot that image with a wide-angle lens. Other times you have an effect of a convex curvature. This comes from a wide-to-tele zoom lens, and the photographer during the shoot cannot correct this. So the recommended lens to use are the medium teles, which are from 85 to 105. They have the minimal distortion characteristics. The good news is all the distortions from lenses can be corrected through software during post-processing. So that ends our lecture. Learn, experiment, practice, and enjoy.
Okay, thank you so much, Kuya Ompong, for that very instructional presentation, very straightforward presentation. So we now have Kuya Ompong with us at Museo Kordilyera. Hello, Kuya Ompong. All right, so hello, good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Kuya Ompong, we have a live Q&A. We have over 150 participants all over the Philippines, and they are usually museum workers. So what you have presented to us is like a makeshift studio, no, for those who are starting up their museums. Can you tell us, for instance, if you don't have this makeshift studio, how does a professional studio taking objects, no photography of objects, like in a different setup?
In a professional studio, the difference basically are the lighting system. We have stronger lights and we have bigger backgrounds, but the camera remains the same, and the discipline has to be the same. So that's all. That's the biggest difference is the lighting system.
Lighting system.
Yes.
So, okay, there's a question here, no, from our participant from Southern Mindanao. Okay, the question is, what are your tips in photographing objects that are already framed in glass?
That's always a dilemma for a photographer. The first thing that I would ask is always, can we remove it from the frame? For the reason is the frame would cast, not because of the glass. The glass is easily solved. It's because the frame edges cast a certain shadow to the edge of the artwork, which becomes uh, an imperfection when you're producing or publishing this photo. Another, so once you can remove it from the glass, from the frame, that will solve everything. But there are instances where you're not allowed to touch anything. So what you would try to find, depending on the size of the frame, is make a light tent, or in a cheaper way is bring it out to a shaded area. Then that will solve your shadow problem. What will appear, the next problem that will appear is the reflection of everything around it. We solve that by putting a black cloth behind the photographer. So what the frame would reflect on to its glass would be just nothing. So you will be able to reproduce that art piece. That's how it's done.
Thank you, Kuya Ompong.
Okay.
This is quite really a challenge for us, no? So usually we teach photography face to face, no?
Yes.
Now this is done online, so it's quite a challenge because usually we also learn by actual demonstration, no? So perhaps in the latter part of the year, when travel restrictions are okay, are over, then we can probably have another session with our participants and do the actual demonstration. But for now, we have to do with this webinar. Okay, we have a lot of questions pouring in. We have a question from Kelly Ramos from Cagayan de Oro. Question: is it possible to take acceptable photos with just a smartphone?
That's a question that I always love answering because since 5 years ago, I would say smartphones are already better than DSLRs. The quality of a smartphone, as long as you don't blow it up to about life size, already beats a DSLR in terms of quality and how do you say, and use. So I would recommend, if you have your mobile phone, use it and make sure this is important. Don't shoot it with a wide angle. You can, because there's a feature that has a telephoto. Always shoot at the telephoto lens.
Okay, thank you so much, Kuya Opo. So related to that question is this question from an anonymous attendee.
Mhm.
Are there phones that are also capable of giving a quality photo? Could you please suggest, or would you able to suggest some?
Uh, am I allowed to give brands?
Yes, I think.
Yes, I am. Okay. I would put it this way. Anything that is above 30,000 onwards will give you a very good quality. So I always hear Huawei is doing really well, and iPhones.
But I'm sure other brands would have competitive, similar brand, quality phones.
Yeah, so this is to confirm what you said from Leslie Obiso. Thank you so much for the information. They also use the smartphone for photographing their museum objects.
Mhm.
Okay. So also from Nina Lazaro Zamora, wow, amazing smartphones are better than DSLR. Thank you for the information. Okay. So question, could you give us tips on how to avoid reflections when photographing shiny objects? So thank you for the very helpful lecture.
Okay, shiny
Shiny.
objects. Yeah, when you're shooting shiny objects, use a light tint. Okay, you may not eliminate everything, but a light tint will give you the proper reflection to show the contours and the shape of the object. So, uh, reflections are not an enemy to the photographer. You can use it and take advantage to show the shape actually of the object. Use a light tent. Try a light tent is you can actually do a white cloth around the object and just light it up and try shooting on the object and see the difference without the light tent. You'll appreciate the object more.
Okay, thank you,
Okay.
Kuya Opong.
Mhm.
So this one is a very interesting question, no, from the YouTube audience. In photographing museum artifacts, is it advisable to work closely with the curators to understand how to better capture the aspects of the artifacts? So doing
So
photography with curator, is it
actually,
advisable?
it is not advisable. It's a recommended way of working, especially photographers have limited knowledge on what they're taking. No? I usually do some research, but it's not enough. The curator will educate the photographer on the history and the story of the piece. And the photographer will be able to absorb the knowledge and be able to present it the way it should be.
Yeah, so usually when we do work with Kuya Ompong and other photographers, the curators usually sit down with them. So they would discuss with you the range of artifacts to be taken. What are they? What are the important aspects of the
Mhm.
artifacts? No, so that's very important working with the museum staff, not only with the curators. You also include the collections registry,
Yes.
the researchers, so they assist in the lighting or even in the arrangement or cleaning of the artifacts. I had an experience doing photography of museum artifacts in Germany with Ate Elicon, also from Color World. So I found an object that is photographed not in well, nice photography, but the object is upside down, no. So
Mhm.
it's been there for, it's in their catalog, it's in their website, it's in their publication, but when I saw it, no, parang 150 years old na yung artifact, no. So if you don't have knowledge on the artifact and you are not familiar with the object, sometimes although it's nice photography, but it's wrongly arranged, no. So that's
Right.
another thing. So it is important to have the curators, no, or the you read the description of the artifacts on how they should be arranged. Okay, a question again from our YouTube audience. How was your experience in Museo Cordillera? What precautions did you take in working with a museum that you don't normally take when taking photographs from non-museum clients? So there are two questions here. How was your experience with us in Museo Cordillera in taking photographs? And two, how does it work for instance, non-museum clients? Because you also have other clients, no, asking for your
Mhm.
service.
Mhm.
What is the difference between a museum and non-museum setup?
Well, the first thing I always ask entering a new place, the first line that I use is always educate me. Because I know when I enter, like even in the mountains, when you go to a field of where the farmers are, I approach the farmer and say, educate me. What do you do? What do you? So basically, I ask them to teach me. So then it makes no difference on where you are. So when you're in a non-museum area, you're educated to work how you're expected. And when you enter the museum and you're not allowed to touch some things and you're not allowed to use lights on some things, you are educated to do those things. So I think the key word is learn before you do anything. Learn the ethics, learn the safety, learn the do's and don'ts before you start working.
Okay, thank you, Kuya Ompong. We have a question from Rona Repancol from UST. What's your suggestion in taking photos of metallic objects that reflect light? Metallic.
Okay, metallic objects. Let me put it in two ways. No? You can have metallic objects that don't reflect. You have metallic objects that reflect in silver. You have metallic objects that reflect in gold. So metals that don't reflect, you just use. We're using a light tint the whole time, no. But then when you're using shooting metal objects that reflect silver, I would always have something silver, a material that's also silver to reflect back on that object. The reason why is when it reflects on the white tint, it loses the luster of the silver. So when you have to find the angle where you have your own metal silver sheet to reflect it back, to bring back the quality, the properties of that metal. In the same way, when you're shooting something in gold or brass, you have to have a similar material that has the same reflectance and the same color to reflect it back. So it will help you enhance the way, or not only enhance. Just imagine if you're holding something gold and you have a white light source, it will reflect on the white. The white light source will reflect on the gold and it loses the gold color. So instead of the white light, you can actually put a gold sheet in between the light and the object, and it will bring back the color of the gold metal.
Kuya Ompong, follow up on that. So, for
Sige.
instance, the Museo Kordilyera has mga lingling-os,
Yeah.
metal objects, necklaces, and others. So, if I were to take the photograph of that object, I'll set it up in my makeshift studio.
Mm-hmm.
Then, what kind of material should be used as a reflector or a kind of inexpensive way to do it? How to do it?
You can go to the bookstores and find gold foils, silver foils. I for silver I use the paper plate that has silver sheeting. Yeah, so that's simple things that you can pick out from bookstores and groceries will work.
Okay, that's very interesting.
Mhm.
Okay, we have more questions coming in from an anonymous attendee. Hi, Sir Ompong. If using smartphone, would clip-on lens help deliver good quality photographs? Using the smartphone and they have
Okay.
good clip-on
Uh-huh,
lens,
uh-huh.
would
Yeah,
that
I know.
deliver good quality photos?
I haven't tried, but everything. Well, I always believe that something over the lens deteriorates the quality. Okay, it's better to have. I'm a purist. You shouldn't put anything over the lens. In fact, when I'm shooting in a museum, I remove my filter. The one that you buy to protect the lens, that is removed totally because I want everything sharp. Anything they put over the lens deteriorates the quality. Although it might make your smartphone smarter, the quality definitely deteriorates. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Kuya Ompong. No? So there's another question from an anonymous attendee. Very helpful lecture. Thank you very much. For textiles and garments, we lay them on a wide table and the camera is set overhead. How about the angle or the positioning of the two lights? No, how do you do that? And the second question, and regarding lighting, what is the technical term we should use when buying them? Okay. So if so the first question is photographing textiles and the
Okay.
camera is overhead.
Yes.
So what about the angle and the positioning of the two lights? How do you do it?
Uh, the answer to that is depends on the size of the textile. If it's a tabletop textile, if the textile fits a tabletop, I would assume it's small. Uh, the lights are still at 45 degrees, but then when you peep through your camera, you can actually lessen the intensity of one to the other depending on what you see, and to be able to show the stitches and the actual texture. No? If you have it really on the same intensity, you might not see the depth of the threads or the fabric.
Okay.
Okay.
So I think, Kuya Ompong, I remember we took photos of blankets, no, big ones. No,
Hmm.
sometimes we have a big white wall
Yeah.
temporarily pinned on the textile
Mm-mm.
and laying on the floor, no, with a
Yeah.
white background. So I think
So
that's
I would describe that to the person who asked the fabric. No, the blanket, how it was shot is we had four sets of lights because it's pretty wide. No? It's as big as a plywood. So two on the left, two on the right, instead of just one of each. All of the same intensity initially, and then I was up in the ceiling. Remember? That's how high you were, about
yeah,
15 feet up. Okay, so that's the difference between having a small fabric and a bigger fabric. So really, you just simulate it and increase the size, scale it up. If you need more lights, then you have to add four, two on each side and maybe three on each side. So it depends on the size of the object also.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah. Size matters
and
also in
size matters, yes.
doing photography. The second question, some of our university museums would like to invest, no, on lights or lighting system. Would you recommend or can you give specific like the specs, for instance, in buying lights?
Yeah.
Yeah,
First, the question was the terminology in buying the type of light. Uh, first thing you have to consider is what type of light do you want. We have two kinds. No? One is the continuous light, which is usually LEDs, and it's a new thing. It came out, I think, 2 3 years ago, and it is easy to use. The second one is the strobes. We call it flash, no? But they are big units called, and they call it strobes. So the advantage of a strobe is the light is more powerful, and meaning more powerful lights would give you sharper photos in terms of uh, shooting at a higher shutter speed. The disadvantage is you do not see the actual light when you're shooting it. Unlike a continuous light, it's like a spotlight designed for photography. It's always on, so you see the effect of the lights on the product. It depends on where you want to invest. That's the advantage. The disadvantage is it's usually much weaker than the strobes, so you will need a tripod to hold up your camera. In the strobes, you can handheld your camera.
Okay.
So continuous light, when you're buying from, let's say, Lazada, is called continuous light. And the flashes are under strobes, studio strobes.
Okay, so for startup museums na they don't have funds yet, what kind of lighting system would you recommend? For instance, they want because in the workshop we have an assignment of cataloging and photographing their museum artifacts. So some of the museums are in different levels. Some have established museums with funding. The others are just starting. So could you tell us like the range of the costing for this particular light and other lights?
Okay. If you're a museum that has zero funding, the window light will be able to do the the documentation. The difficulty there is the light quality changes every time. Every time the sun is out, it disappears. So you have to have a lot of post processing after. The next level is would be the ring light that they're using. I think let's put the next level with the table lamps that you use for reading,
Yeah.
which I used on my demonstration. So just buy 2 bulbs, 3 bulbs, you can make it work. So the next level we did the ring lights that you used in Ifugao, I think, no?
Uh, and
And
also
then
these
and
webinars.
yeah, and it's nice. It works. And you go up to a light tent is a cheaper way, no? That's a one big light box with 3 LED lights. It's less than 10,000 pesos. And you go up to the strobes and the continuous light already.
Yeah. Okay, so that's very helpful, Kuya Ompong.
Hmm.
Kasi some of the museums that we visited, there's no camera equipments, no,
Hmm.
so smartphone and ring
And
light.
window light, yeah.
Yeah. So mix and match.
Pwede.
So they have to be very innovative in and resourceful on setting up their own makeshift studios also. Okay, we have a question from Sol Maris Trinidad. While artifacts are varied in different number of sides, etc., no, so she's talking about the angles. So, approximately how many photographs and angles should be taken per object or per material? Depende.
Ikin, I think you will be able to answer that as a curator
Yeah.
because I usually take instructions from you.
Uh, I think that depends on the curator and how extensive do you want to document the object. Usually, if it's 3D, so front, back, side, left, and right, and then you also take the details, no, special details of the object, no. So, for instance, in textiles, you take on the designs, the embroidery work, no, or other features that you can see in the object. So it varies, no? What about you, Kuya Ompong? How many photos do you usually take?
For textile, I do, it's a standard that I do the whole uh, fabric and then each corner. If there's differences and probably the way it's stitched, so probably 8 to 10 would be minimum.
Yeah.
Even for wood, no, so many angles.
Yeah. For our purpose, we usually use a full angle photo for our collections registry. And then we do condition reports. No? Iba-iba yung
Oh, yeah.
photos na. Depende kung may crack yung hagabi or yung sculpture or if there are, some tear on the textile. So it depends no, on the purpose that where your photographs will be used for your collections registry. Iba din yun sa publication. No? So that requires a lot of suggestions from the curator also. Okay, so another question from anonymous attendee. Can you give some tips on how to photograph furnitures, no? Like cabinets and tables, no? So some museums, they have mga antiques, no? Yung ginagamit nung unang panahon. what suggestions, tips, or that you can give on how to photograph these kinds of massive objects?
You have to invest in very good lights with a soft box. So that will, I imagine myself shooting it with three lights, one on top, one on the left, and on the right. So you're actually trying to light up a whole room when you're shooting a small furniture, because that's the way you usually look at it.
Yeah, so mukhang malakihan na objects.
Malaki, malaki.
If I remember, at Museo Kordilyera, we actually installed, mounted a whole Ifugao house inside. No? So this is the Kadangyan house. So lahat ng ilaw yata naka-on.
You're correct.
We also added more lights, not to actually do a photography of the entire house. No, so again, I think okay yung suggestion on investing more lights,
More
no,
light.
for your a kind of photography of big objects. Okay, another question, Kuya Ompong. Have you used a photography turntable, or what you call as lazy Susan,
Yeah.
before a museum object? So yung parang umiikot siya. So if yes, what was the purpose of shooting it on a turntable? So maybe I understand this question as putting that on the object on a turntable, and as it turns, you do the photography. Have you done that? And
Uh,
what's the purpose of that?
there are two ways to look at it. When you're a still photographer, the lazy Susan makes work faster. No? Especially when you're given a certain time of like 3 days to shoot so many objects, the turning table will help you focus only in, like, you focus in one point, and then you'll able to turn the objects in different angles. So if you're using a cable or a remote, you don't even have to go back to the camera. So you just keep shooting. It makes work faster, and you get more angles actually. If you're shooting video, that will give you a continuous image of the product. It's a very good tool. It's a recommended tool when you're shooting objects.
Okay. Follow up, Kuya Ompong. How can you make a lazy Susan if they don't have a real lazy Susan tabletop?
Ah, I actually made my own. I just bought yung mga bearings from the car, and then just put a slot into the inner circle, and then just adapt it on top. The table goes on top of the outer bearing, and the base goes to the inner side of the bearing. It's done. Very cheap. It's a very cheap way of
Yeah.
doing it. Yeah.
Okay, so I think we have more questions, Kuya Ompong. Ang daming tanong dito. Okay, question from our YouTube audience. Some fragile artifacts don't do well to being under intense lighting or camera flashes. What can be done regarding this problem when trying to digitalize these fragile objects?
I would assume that the question is, if you're not allowed to use lights, you can actually go into where that object is and do time exposure. No, it's it needs to be mastered, but it will work. It will work. So if the fragile objects you're not allowed to use lights, just go to that place where it's at and find a way. Using time exposure, you'll be able to do a good photograph.
Okay, so I can think of any object that really needs or doesn't need light, no?
Now, I remember just a story. Now, I remember the mummy in Kabayan when it was first
Yes,
discovered.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay, the Japanese photographer went in early in the morning, totally dark. And when the first light came out, it hit the bones and everything. He was just there waiting for the moment, and he was able to grab that photo without using. He was using available light, and it turned out really well.
Yeah, so that's
Mm.
very interesting, no? Natural light,
Natural light. Mm.
wait for the moment.
Yes.
Okay, so we have more questions. Is it recommended to use filter or Photoshop on final photographs? And what are the limits, no, in using filter or Photoshop in digitizing museum artifacts?
That's a tricky question because okay, because one, I am one of those photographers who shy away from Photoshop because I believe that once you prepare it correctly, you don't need to do any post processing. But since it is very technical, no, doing that type of photography is very technical. I have so many kinds of meters to be able to achieve that. No, it's kind of expensive to invest in like a color temperature meter. I don't normally hear people using that. No, and then you have a manual light meter. But since a lot of us don't have that, you really have to do post processing. But you only do it if you know and if you know what you're trying to achieve. No, it's not because it looks nice. It's more of does it look like the real thing. So, but if you don't know where you're going, then don't even touch what your job. That's it.
So,
So yes,
so I think it is important to keep the integrity and the
yes, that's the way.
of the museum
The music,
artifact, because
correct.
if you use too much filter, it's like it's a different form na, no, pag you use too much Photoshop or too much filter. Okay, thank you, Kuya Ampo. Here's another interesting question. Are we allowed to use colored backgrounds such as orange, green, or dark blue to highlight certain features of an artifact? Or is it the standard white, black, and gray colors?
White, black, gray. The answer to that is white, black, and gray does not disturb your white balance when you're shooting. Once you start introducing other colors, the camera will start correcting and try to bring, like I said, try to bring it back to a neutral gray. So once it does that, the color of the object changes. If you try shooting a red background, you get a green object. I don't know if you've tried that. And then if you do a blue background, you'll get a warmer yellow object. So if you know, but if you are technically prepared to measure all of those, and you feel that a certain object is good at red, then go ahead as long as your camera has been calibrated properly, that it doesn't influence the final color of the object.
Okay, very interesting, no?
Mhm,
Kala ko yun lang white, black, and gray are standard for
mhm,
museums, no?
mhm.
It also has an effect on the lighting
And the color, yeah,
and
the color
colors.
of the object changes. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So, Kuya Peng, from YouTube, no? So, hello. Were there instances you photograph objects sensitive to light or objects that cannot be exposed in light, no? How do you go about it? The question from Katrina Yap.
I think we touched on that
Yeah.
earlier on, right? But then there are times that you have to use a special camera. Remember, we were researching on the UV camera and the infrared camera. There are some instances where you have to introduce a different kind of light. Like Iken and I had to research on UV lights to be able to bring out the effects of the tattoo on the skin,
Yeah.
right? And you have a camera designed to do that, to capture that. No? And sometimes you have to use infrared light when you're using some objects are sensitive to that. it might not be sensitive to, it might be sensitive to the regular light, but it's not sensitive to infrared. So there are other ways to approach uh, photography using different lights. So you have the regular light, you have a UV light, and the infrared light. Those are available in the market.
Yeah. So to add more information on that, because we were photographing, doing research on tattoos on the skin. So
Mhm,
these are actually live people with tattoos, no?
mhm, mhm.
So what better? So I was trying to investigate the depth of the ink when they are pierced on the skin, no? So Kuya Ompong suggested if we can do UV lights, no? And it did came out well, no, on that aspect, no? So you can actually use special lights for that. Okay, Kuya Ompong from Graciel Rojas, question. Kuya Ompong, can you tell us about the software you use in processing the photos of museum objects? Can they be downloaded for free, or do they have freeware counterparts that you can recommend?
Okay, first of all, I don't use Adobe Photoshop. I haven't even touched it for a while, and not yet, not ever. So what I use is AC DC. I got it for 10 years ago, and I'm still using it up to now. I think they have a better version. It's AC DC. I heard it's similar to Lightroom. No? So that's the only software I use to post process, if ever. The limits of post processing for me is only sharpness, brightness, and contrast. That's all.
Okay, are you still okay, Kuya Ompong? More
Oh,
questions, no? So
it's okay.
how exciting this would be if it's really live demo, no? So you
Mm,
can
mm.
actually show us the way how to do it. Anyway, so the question from Leslie Obiso: do we have standard dimensions of photographs for mounting during exhibitions?
Standard, there is none. More from experience, it's more of budget. It's dictated by the budget of the photographer or the museum.
Yeah, I thought so too. So no matter how big, you can actually print at Museo Kordilyera in the previous exhibition. We printed double the size of plywood, no, for
Exactly.
archival photographs on our walls, no. So
Mhm.
there's no limit in terms of the size, as long as you have the funds to pay for the printing
Mhm,
cost.
mm. But I
Uh,
think there's a minimum size for
yeah, there's
visually acceptable. It's about 12 by 18. Yeah.
okay. Next question. What kind of bulbs can be used for table lamps? There are different kinds: warm, white, daylight, and others.
Oh, that's a nice question. So when you're buying those bulbs, behind it there's a technical uh, specification of the bulbs. You'll see your color temperature is there, either 3800, 4800, 5500, 6500. All those you can use as long as you put your camera into the setting of that bulb. But if you don't have that idea, it's best to buy the daylight, which is at 5500. Even if it's not written on the box, it's rated at 5500. Daylight is best.
Okay, so if you ask me about the price, because I regularly buy them, it's 90
There you go.
pesos, 80 to 90 pesos
Oh,
yung
there you go.
one bulb.
Well,
Okay, thank you for that useful question. Okay, question to me or to you. How do you photograph books for catalog use?
is
Flat
it?
objects. How actually it says here question for me, but
Yeah.
I asked the question to you. How do we photograph books for catalog use?
I cannot imagine are you shooting it per page? I would scan it if I'm taking every page would be best. But if
Uh,
I'm taking the book in how it looks like the cover page, it's treated the same way as a regular object.
yeah. So there's also a follow-up question. What are the angles needed in photographing books? No? Depende sa purpose. Like if it's an
Correct. Yeah.
old book, an archival book, usually you just open, half open lang siya. And there's a foam at the back where it rests. Then you can do photography on that, on specific pages. There are, for instance, the regular books that you want to photograph for catalog, usually you take photos of the front cover, you let it stand, or you let it rest on a foam. What else? Yeah, no, so iba-iba. At the UP Baguio archives, we have a machine that can scan the books without touching it. No, so it's a kind of well, it's a very expensive machine. Usually, they deal with archival papers, documents, very old documents, old books. No, so there's also a way of doing that. No, for other purposes. Okay. Okay ka pa dyan, Kuya Ompong?
Okay. Good.
Okay. What are the challenges in doing photography for museum artifacts? Have you encountered challenges, no, on doing photography of museum artifacts?
The main challenge when you're being asked to do a series of objects is the size. Actually, it's some are just thumb size, some are just a life size. So you have to plan on how you're going to shoot through all of this within like 3 days. The challenge also the type of material. When I'm planning this, it's you look at either how much wood are you dealing with, how much pottery, how much fabric, and then siyempre iba-ibang sizes yon. So it's the planning on more of how to do it efficiently. Lighting is already after 50 years, it's already second nature, no? But it's more of planning it to make the work faster.
Yeah. So when you do photography for objects, for instance, a museum would like you to photograph objects. You're given 3 days to do, like, let's say 1,000 objects. So how do you plan it? Do you do it by size? Do you do it with in terms of the function, the material? No. How do you plan this photography?
Usually, I start with the medium objects first. No, the medium would be for me is from 12 inches to about 2 feet, and then from there I work to smaller. No, I don't go bigger because bigger totally changes the whole lighting setup. So that's how you do it. So medium objects, then start with wood, baskets, 3D objects first.
Yeah.
Then and then 2D objects come later on because I would call it easier ng konti, no? The big objects come last because those are the heavier to move. Takes time.
What about doing photography for mannequins? How do you deal with it? There's a question there on, of course, in some university museums, they have like mannequins or where they put different objects in there, no, yung mga living mannequins or mannequins. How do you do the photography for
The
that? Are they like humans? Treatment din yung parang photography?
I would say, yeah, they're treated like real human beings. No, you have to have a long strip light. It's a strip light is a soft box, no, that's about 12 inches or 18 inches wide, about 4 feet high. Yun ang light source mo. Kung kulang yon, you have to have two of those or three on one side, two of those and two of those on the other side. Makakon siya. Mannequins are parang tao eh. Hindi na malapad. No? It's thin and high. Ganun. So, iba ang lighting nun.
Yeah. Yeah, so para silang tao when you
Para
tweet.
silang tao. Correct.
Kasi they are dressed with different attires, no? At the Museo Kordilyera, we have 5 life-size mannequins that are just like a regular Apayao, Kalinga, Bontok mannequins, no? So, para rin silang tao. Okay, Kuya Ompong, there's a question from John Pedroso from Museo de Santa Ana at Iloilo City. Okay, so this is his question. He said that they will open their exhibitions this coming March 14, no, next week. The next thing that they will do is to document the artifacts. Can you please advise him on how to photograph the Santo collection? And how are we going to go about this? Because the paints of the Santo are already chipping off. From John Pedroso of Museo de Santa Ana.
The question, I don't know. My question is, can you handle this object to bring it out to a light tent, or is it just untouchable na? No? Pag hindi na pwedeng galawin, but you're allowed to bring in the lights, and you have to go to the object if the object cannot come to you. And probably bring some backgrounds if you need to isolate it. If it's still possible. If it's not, just take it where it is. And that makes the story.
Yeah.
Uh,
Ang hirap nito, no? So the Santo, the paints are chipping off. Then you have to do this light system, no? So it's putting the objects into much pressure.
Stress.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so John, I hope you take the advice of Kuya Ompong of taking in situ photography where they are and using light tent, no, for your photography. Okay, from Leslie Obiso, how about faded old photographs? How do you deal with it? How do you take photos of faded old photographs?
If they're not big, I usually scan it because the scanner works really well with those kinds of objects.
Okay, yeah, my suggestion is also to do scanning. Yeah, so I think that's the solution for faded old photographs. Okay, question from our YouTube audience. Does Museo Kordilyera have its own studio for photographing its objects? Are museums recommended to have their own studio? From Kelly Rambos of Cagayan de Oro. We don't have a studio, a photo studio at Museo Kordilyera. We're setting up one, but we have makeshift photo studio. We have this black box. It's called the brand is called Godox. You can research online. It's a big black box where you can actually take photos of small objects, and then the rest we follow the recommendation of Kuya Ompong. No, bigger than 12 inches, we already have this makeshift studio, like what Kuya Ompong taught us in the lecture. No, so you can actually set that up. If you don't have a professional studio in your museum. Okay, Kuya Ompong, the question is for you. Do you recommend to have a photo studio in the museum? And how are you going to set this up?
It is recommended that you have your own studio. And it's that room is dedicated for that purpose only. Okay. Find a room that's about 10 feet by 10 feet. And then you can just buy a backdrop or make one, probably a gray cloth that hangs from the ceiling down to the floor, and put lights in. The reason and the advantage of having your own studio in the museum is it's for safety, no? The artifacts are there. You don't have to bring it out. And what's important is you get to practice and improve each day that you use it.
Yeah, so the security of your artifacts, especially if you're dealing with gold ornaments, no, yung delikadong artifacts, it's advisable that you can set it up inside your museum. Even though if it's not permanent setup, it could be a makeshift studio, no, for the setup. Okay, reply immediately from John Pedrosa. Thank you daw, Kuya Ompong, for this advice that you gave on the Santos. Okay, question from Sol Maris Trinidad. Aside from a space to set up and take photos, what else would a photographer need from the museum or from the institution? Like list of items, types of materials. No, so she's asking aside from the space and how to take photos, what are the things needed, no, to have what are the things needed for the photographer to carry out the photography of objects in museum setup.
Okay, first, if you have the budget, you need 3 lights at least. This is already medyo upscaled studio, no? So 3 lights, light stands, a tripod, a good camera, and backgrounds, no? The white, black, and gray. It's a very minimal requirement, no? What's
Yeah.
important is training for the person who will use it. Uh, Once he is trained well, it's going to be easy.
Yeah, I totally agree, Kuya Ompong. Even if you have this expensive equipments, but you don't know how to use it, it
Sayang.
purpose, no?
Mm.
So let me just repeat again for our participants. Recommended, no? You need 3 lights, light stand, a good camera, and a background. So this could be gray, black, and white, no?
Plus a
For the
tripod.
and a tripod.
And a
Okay.
tripod, yeah.
Okay, so 3 lights, light stand, 2 lights, 3 lights, light stand, camera, a good camera, background. This could be gray, black, and white, and then a tripod. No, for startup museums. Kuya Ampong, they may want to ask how much would this cost for instance, no, for university museums.
A little less than 100,000 would be a good already.
Yeah. So ganun, no? So at the Museo Cordillera, we're trying to set up or acquiring, although we have the others here, we also need to have good backgrounds, no? So there's a background called Savage. I forget the name. Um, ano na nga yun, Kuya Ompong? The
Savage, yeah,
Savage
savage, yeah.
backgrounds, no?
Seamless papers.
Less papers. So you
Yes.
have rolling up different backgrounds, no, that you can also use for your museum, provided that you have devoted a space for the photography of objects. Okay. Unless you have questions, meron pa palang tanong dito. Okay. Kuya Ompong, are you free for consultation for other needs of our museum?
Of course, yes, definitely, most welcome.
We'll send, if you're interested to do consultations on the photography of your objects, you can reach out to Kuya Ompong. His email is ompongtan@gmail.com.
Yes.
ompongtan@gmail.com. So if you have other queries and if you're interested to set up your makeshift studios or you need photography needs also, you can reach out to Kuya Ompong, no? Okay. So, wala nang tanong. Naubos na question natin.
Okay na.
Do you have other advice, Kuya Ompong, other notes that our participants should take consideration when doing their photography and starting up their studios in their museums?
I would suggest that you look at all the objects that you are going, and decide on what to invest in.
Kuya Ompong, nag-freeze ka ba dyan? So Kuya Ompong,
Nagana?
can you repeat that again, please? Last advice on our participants for those starting up
Oh,
museums and those with established museums already.
okay. Okay. Go through all of the things, the objects that you are supposed to take photos of and see how much metal with reflective objects, how much 2D objects such as books, documents, and how much 3D objects. And from there, you will be able to know what you will be investing on. The important thing is you practice. When those things come in, just practice, experiment, and just enjoy.
Okay, thank you, Kuya Ompong. No, so in relation to that, it is important to have an object count of all the artifacts that you have in the
Mhm.
museum. This is the reason why you need to catalog your artifacts. We already sent the forms, sample forms that you could follow, and then you can also continue doing your photography based on the suggestions of Kuya Ompong. And these photographs can be included in your catalog because, like I said, you can use this for your collections registry, for publication, for conservation purposes. No, so the documentation is really very important. No, for our museums. Okay, like I said, and this webinar would say you don't need to have expensive equipments to photograph your objects. Smartphone nga lang pwede na, and then your ring light,
Pwede na.
that's already less than, if you have a phone, then hindi mo na kailangan bilihin. Yung ring light would cost around 950 pesos, no? For the regular size, no? So less than 1,000. But if you want to go high-end, Kuya Ompong, that's more than 100,000 above. If you want to invest in a good camera, let's say mga 80,000 siguro yung mamahalin na DSLR, no? So if you can find second-hand phones, second-hand cameras, or uh, kung may sale ng mga camera, you can also get them for your museum. Okay, thank you so much, Kuya Ompong, for your lecture, and we have a very, very productive Q&A. And we have this comment from anonymous attendee. Thank you so much for the unselfish sharing of expertise, Kuya Ompong. No? Thank you so much. Okay, may nag-greet pa ng happy birthday. Thank you so much,
Happy
Jenny
birthday.
Joy Napolitano. Thank you for your birthday greetings. Okay. All right. So thank you, Kuya Ompong. And hopefully when we can travel to your museums, would like to bring you to Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao to help us with the photography of teaching photography to the different museums all over the Philippines. That's already on board. So we are just waiting for a word how we can travel to these places, to these museums, to help them in their cataloging and other aspects, no, of museology. Okay, thank you, Kuya Ompong, so much for your time. Okay, so tomorrow we will have Boots Natividad. Boots Herrera, sorry, I'm getting confused. We will have Boots Herrera who will talk about assessing the significance of museum artifacts. This is part 2 of the lecture. We had her previously in level 1. Now we are gearing up to level 2 on assessing museum artifacts. Please don't forget to fill in our feedback assessment survey to get a certificate of attendance for today's webinar. Okay. Next week, we will have a session on curating museum exhibitions, part 2, and using digital media, no, part 2 for your exhibition. So that came out in our survey, dun sa training needs assessment survey on other topics that you would include for the webinar. So if you have questions and other clarifications, you can send us your questions, no, via email or to at our FBMK page of Museo Kordilyera. You can send us a PM if you have further questions. We already sent out the exercises, no, for these webinars, and we hope that you can work on that. And for this session on doing photography of museum artifacts, You can actually do that, no? This will be a work in progress, no? Do it by piecemeal. Kunyari, for day one, you want to do the photography of baskets, and then simultaneously working with the cataloging of artifacts. Okay, so thank you so much, and see you tomorrow for day two of our week three of our museum online training. Okay, thank you so much, and fill in our feedback form from the link provided, no, to get a certificate of attendance for today's webinar. Okay, maraming salamat po, and see you tomorrow.